can see, that is a very, very bent rod. Apparently, it hydrolocked. That's bad. That's real bad. Here we go. Hey guys, welcome to the JW Speed YouTube channel. I'm Jimmy, and today we're going to take the engine out of Chris Conway's S2000. It just went to the dyno. It made about 1280 on a mainline Pro Hub on E85 with the new 7385R, and something happened. There's a problem with the fuel injector or a tuning issue, and it's been dumping fuel in the crankcase, and got it back from the dyno. It's making a noise. So a little bit of bearing material. So we got to get it out, get bearings changed, and get it back in. So let's get started. Alright guys, we got the turbo most of the way unbolted up top and got all the fuel lines and charge pipes disconnected and got the tranny out, and now I just got to undo the steering bolt and lower the subframe some to get this clutch bell housing off. I think I'm going to take the engine out of the top because it's really hard to get the intake manifold on and off this engine. The Skunk 2 is pretty difficult to unbolt, so I'm going to leave that on the engine and we'll pop this thing out and get it apart. I actually decided to take the turbo off, and now I am undoing the wire harness all throughout the intake manifold area, which, if you've ever worked on an S2000, you're well aware that that is the most painful place to work on these cars. So I'm taking the bolts out of, if you see here, taking the bolts out of the coolant hose adapter is actually one of the easiest ways to work on this area. now you can pull the hoses back and get the wire harness out. And there you go. Next, I am going to go back to the clutch, which I decided to get away from because I had to get the turbo off to get the engine down a little bit lower and tilted. Got this nice, I don't know, PFAB, some sort of log manifold. About the best thing it's good for is hoisting an engine out of an engine bay. So let's get back to it, and should have it out here in no time. Got all the bolts out of the bell housing. You lower the subframe down. I didn't have to go as much because I already undid this engine mount. But you have to undo the steering shaft, unplug the wire harness from the power steering, and you have 2 bolts right there, 1 bolt right up there, and you have that top bolt, that bolt, and the 2 bottom bolts, and this bolt right below in the girdle of the block. And then you have a bolt in the top of the starter. You can, if you're good, you can get it from the top or the bottom. On a stock car, I'd usually recommend getting it from the top because your knock sensor is very delicate. So if you try to get this top bolt out of the starter with the knock sensor still in the car, you're asking to break it. I usually like to take off the knock sensor first, very carefully, or even super glue around the edge of the knock sensor where the plastic meets the metal before you even try to take it out, and let that cure for a couple hours at least before you even try to take it out. Because if you look at a factory knock sensor, this one's been super glued, but the glue they use in between the plastic and the metal, it does not last at all. It goes away, it disintegrates, and it'll break right off. So you'll be buying a new knock sensor when you're trying to get that top starter bolt out. All right, so I do have the ratchet on the starter bolt, and I'll show you guys where that's at. It's right there. And if you use a 3-inch 3/8 extension, you can actually reach it from the bottom. Alright, got the engine out. Now, just got to take the valve cover off, take the timing chain off, and pull the crankshaft. Replace all the bearings. Check out the crankshaft. The flange on the 2.4 looks good. I don't see any signs of the flywheel vibrating. Since it's a 2.4, it has a lot more harmonics than the F20 or even the F22. So we'll inspect the crank pulley, make sure it's not moving at all, and get this thing fixed back up, get back to racing. So let's tear into it. It is far, far worse than anticipated. But I don't think the block is destroyed. But definitely gonna have to clean some stuff up. Alright, so you see where the block's notched? The rod is very, very bent. You can see where as you guys can see, that is a very, very bent rod. Apparently, it hydrolocked at some point. We're lucky the rod did not come outside the block. It's gonna need a new rod and clean up that cylinder. And I'm assuming we're gonna be looking at number 1 injector for the fueling problem, because that's bad. That's real bad. Alright. Well, I'm gonna get to it and start yanking this stuff out. I'm gonna have to pull the head. I don't have an option. So, here we go. So I got this apart and noticed on the cylinder head, in addition to that connecting rod, that it got hydrolocked, that the valves, if you look closely, you can see 2 dents on the exhaust valves where the exhaust valves and intake valves collided. So I'm going to pull them out replace them for peace of mind and check to see if they're straight. I'll probably keep both sets of valves just as spares. Check them to make sure they're straight, you know. And here's the piston. You can see some scuffing on it where it was rubbing the cylinder wall where this rod had actually generated heat right in there. You can see the sleeve there has some pretty deep notches, but I'm going to clean that up and we're going to roll with it. I put a bearing at this end of the crank and a bearing at this end of the crank, and I'm going to dial indicate it, make sure the crank is still nice and straight, and we're going to send it. Shiny, 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 dark. So this one is bent. We'll replace it. And I gotta clean up the edges of that where the rod was hitting. But it's not cracked, so we're gonna put it back together and go racing. Got the crank cleaned up, so I'm gonna go and set it in the block. I have only 2 thrust washers and a bearing at this end and a bearing at this end, and we're going to use the dial indicator to see how straight it is. Right about 1,000th, which is as good as Honda sends these K24 cranks out the door from their factory. So I already checked this journal and this journal, and they're all about 1,000th. So run out looks good, and next we're going to clean out the oil passages inside the crankshaft and probably run some 1000 grit over all the journals just to make sure there's no high spots. There's no real scratches to speak of, but it never hurts to run a really nice fine paper over all the journals. So got to clean out the crank journals, the oil passages. So carb cleaner bent at a very short 90-degree angle fits very nicely inside of each oil passage, and you really want to focus on spraying the dead ends. So where the ball bearing is pressed into the end of the oil passage, you want to spray up towards that ball bearing. So in case there's any trash, any gunk, metal dust, or anything like that, you'll blast it all out with some carb cleaner and then with a little bit of air. So thank you for watching part 1 of this S2000 engine rebuild. Part 2 we will continue with the reassembly of the F24 race engine. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode. Thank you for watching the JW Speed YouTube channel.